Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey. We'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we will come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that will review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another installment of Positive Recovery MD with two of your three hosts today, Jason Powers, Jamie Damaris. So today we have a awesome guest, a friend of mine that I actually went to school with, Deborah Healy Hammons. She graduated with a BA in English and creative writing in 1973 from Stanford. She got her master's at Penn, and she's worked doing creative writing. She's written shows that have been on TV and have been published, and she was served as the chairman of the board and corporate secretary of the Family Ranch, which I do want to talk about, and talk about Yellowstone, probably more than what you want. But what I found to be sort of the impetus for inviting her to be a guest was she served, she was a politician serving in the representative House District 27 in her home state of Wyoming for 3 terms. And of course, I thought of this 2 years ago when there was this big election for president. And, I was like, God, can't we all just get along type of thing? And I was like, Debbie would be great. And that's how slow the wheels turn, I guess. But welcome. Do you remember what a positive introduction is?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. It's funny, like people that I teach positive psychology to, like Jamie and others, they know a lot about positive psychology from me, but lots of students graduate from our program and don't use everything that I use. So it's not a shock to me. You don't use it every day. You don't know it. But here's how it's basically a 3-minute or so blurb about you at your best. So we did this when we divided into cohorts, like that first day. It's a story that happened in space and time when you were at your best. So it's like, what would your best friend tell about you when you were in your element?
I love that. And as you were talking, I was remembering what we used when we knew each other all those years ago and we did for positive introductions. It's like you have an inventory of things that you've done in your life. And so at any given moment, which one do you pull off the shelf and share with others? As you were talking, I was thinking for myself, something that I did that really is important to me at this point in my life is that this was years ago, and I spent most of my life in my hometown, a little town called Whirland, Wyoming, and I had been teaching a little bit. I was teaching I'm a middle school, teaching 8th grade language arts, did that for a short period of time. And while I was at school, I heard about a woman that we all knew. She was generous, and she and her husband had 3 kids. And her husband had just run off with a woman he worked with and had just left his family, abandoned his family. And they said that she was an at-home mom. And so all of a sudden she didn't have income. She didn't have her spouse. She'd been insulted because this guy ran off with this gorgeous blonde. And she had 3 kids, 2 of whom were teenagers. And she was homesick and nobody to take care of her. And we were really close to Thanksgiving, and she was out of money and had nothing in her refrigerator. So after work, I went to the grocery store and I bought a turkey and dressing and potatoes and milk and eggs and everything that I could think of. And I drove over to her house and I knocked on the door, and sure enough, when I opened it, her house was empty, and she was terribly sick and was just wearing a bedspread, was just wrapped in this big blanket. And I said, I'm here with food. And I opened her refrigerator and it was completely empty. And I put the food in and I gave her a hug and I said, I hope you will get better. I believe you will get better. So many of us care about you. Have a good Thanksgiving with your kids. and I left. And that's who I am. That's
great.
You hear about something, you do it, and you don't even remember it afterwards. You just know you were called to do it, right?
Totally. Is there any update on her?
No, I don't, I mean, life went on for her. She got a job and had trouble with her kids and, but for that moment in time, she knew that people cared and that it would be okay.
Absolutely. That's awesome, dude. You got lots of strengths you were rocking, as we say. You were rocking the love, compassion, I guess, judgment, courage, teamwork,
kindness.
It's funny. Jason and I were in the same program together, and of course, you periodically do your signature strength test, and I test myself periodically. And I don't know about you, but I have all new signature strengths now than I did when we were in the program. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, I really do.
So are the ones that we mentioned up at the top? I'm just curious.
Well, one of my signature strengths was when we were in the master's program was a love of knowledge. And I'll tell you what, being in a master's program cured that.
No more.
I learned as much as I wanted and found out I had other interests in life, like appreciation of beauty and things like that. But no, I've really completely switched. It was, some of them are still the same, but kindness has really moved up the chart for me. And I think that's partly because of the times in which we're living. I really do. I think fairness, which is another way of saying equity. There are just certain things I think that I've moved into a different spot than I was in 10 years ago.
All right. So Debbie, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Well, it was funny. I spent much of my life in my hometown, which is a small town of about 5,000 people, and in Wyoming. And so if you're from Wyoming, you're where you have the least populated state. And what you find is that I think you have a sense of your place in the world because nature and the landscape is huge and you are small. So you're not running things. Years ago, I read the James Michener book, and he had a quote in that from Maimonides. Am I saying that correctly? I don't know. Who said that?
Maimonides. Yeah.
Maimonides. Okay, thank you. I've only read it. I've never heard it out loud. Okay, Maimonides, who said the purpose of the universe is not the gratification of our puny selves. And you really know that growing up in Wyoming. I think for people who live in cities, they're surrounded by man's successes, the huge buildings, these architecture, all of the money, all of that. That's all man's product. But when you grow up in a little bitty town in the middle of Wyoming and your family's in ranching, you know that man has limited impact on the world in which we live. So anyway, I grew up in a little town. I'm all about connection and knowing people. And I used to say politically, you could disagree with somebody, but if you broke your leg, they'd get you to the hospital and bring you supper when they took you home. You just knew that you could rely on your friends, and that's what community meant. So I went from there, left there, and was, as you're growing up, you go, I can hardly wait to go to a new place. And so I went to Stanford University. I was very fortunate to be selected to go there. And while I was there, I wasn't nearly as important as I was in Wyoming, let's put it that way. But I had a great time. I really had a great time. And I majored in writing, which during that period of time, it was still a real transition for women in the country. And so when I was growing up, you didn't get to participate in sports. Schools didn't offer that. So it was just a real transitory time in terms of our whole culture. And then after that, I worked in television. I was away from Wyoming for about 10 years, worked in television, had my own TV show down in Arizona. And then my dad contacted me and said no one wanted to take over the family ranch and would I consider coming home. So I came back to Wyoming and worked on the ranch for about 4 years. And then one morning I said to I met my husband in our hometown and I said, I have a choice. I can either continue to love my father or I can continue to work for the ranch. I don't think I can do both. So when you mentioned the TV show Yellowstone, I have real strong feelings about that. And, these family businesses where you get to work together are very complicated things. Let's put it that way. So anyway, I continued to live in our small town, and one day, years later, we were raising our family. We have 2 boys, and they're adults now, and I have grandchildren. But one morning, I looked in the newspaper in the want ads. That's how you used to find jobs, and Wyoming PBS was advertising. They needed a writer host for a TV show. And it was in a different town, but I contacted him and I said, would you guys consider me living in where I live and, working with you? So they said, well, let's see how it works. And so I ended up having a weekly TV show where I traveled all over the state of Wyoming, met people all over. It was a blast. I just loved doing it. Was able to do that. All these people who are hybrid jobs now, I did that for years. So I know what it's like to, write a script and run down and throw another load of laundry in. It's really convenient. Anyway, if I'm in Wyoming, but I'm not going to name the political parties. I was in the minority party in Wyoming, and I had people in the other party come and ask me to run for the state legislature. I ended up doing that, and I got elected. And so the reason I ran was kind of like my positive introduction of myself is I ran because I felt like I had something to offer, and our community needed everybody to pitch in because all these little towns all across the Midwest are all dying. The ag towns are all dying. You have these demographic maps, and the young people leave because there's not opportunity. And I thought, we've got to fight to save this place. And if I can do anything at the state level, I've got to do it. So anyway, I did that. And then my husband and I have retired, and we moved to Colorado, and I've been here for the last 8 years.
So before Jamie asked you about Yellowstone, so you applied to the Masters of Positive Psychology and were accepted. And, what have you done? Have you done anything because of it or with it? Like, how has it changed the last decade of your life, if at all?
Jason, I ended up doing my CAP. It was so hard. I don't know about you, but you knew what you wanted to do. I had so many different areas of interest. And so I ended up picking positive aging. So that's what I did my capstone on. And it turned out while I was doing it, the local senior center lost their director. And so I went to the board and I said, I know that I normally wouldn't be doing something like this, but if you're willing to change, I would love to come and direct the senior center. And I've just gotten a master's and written my thesis on positive aging. And I want to try a whole bunch of programs here and see what works. So they hired me. And so for a year, I tried every intervention and everything I could do. I retrained the whole staff. We increased participation by 700%.
Wow.
And so other senior centers were coming to see how we were doing it. So it was growing to other communities in our region, in our northwest part of Wyoming. And so it was a really exciting time just to see how these little things that you do can make such a huge difference.
Like, what are a couple examples and define positive aging?
Okay, this is really interesting. And I'm continuing. You're asking, what am I doing as I'm going? I've been following this ever since and trying to read everything I can. Very exciting things are going on in the field. What they know is how you feel personally, how you feel about aging will predict. It can be up to 8 years longer that you will live if you have positive feelings about aging. But if you think, oh my gosh, I'm getting older, and that's why when I get out of bed, I ache, and it's because I'm old. And old people don't think as well, and so I'm not going to do as much, and I'm no longer going to do these activities because I'm old. And so if you blame things on your age and you kind of feel diminished in your daily living, that literally shortens your life. They've come up with that. So the kinds of things that I did at the senior center, number one, I trained the staff. I said, your main job is to make people feel welcomed and that they want to be here, because people are coming here. You serve warm meals, but they're coming there because they're lonely. They want to be around other people. They want to be connected. So what we're going to do is come up with as many different excuses for them to come here. They can come for the meal. If they don't want to eat that much food, let's have a salad bar, for Pete's sakes. And they can take the rest of the meal home and have it for dinner. Let's make sure we have gentle yoga. Let's make sure that we have cards. Let's make sure that we have bingo. Let's make sure that the person who greets them at the front desk is really happy to see them. And then I taught them how when you interact with people, you're authentic, you're there with the moment, you're listening to them. And if that person comes in and says, oh my gosh, my grandson just lost his job and I'm feeling bad, you listen to that, but then you turn it around and say, hey, I know you were planning a trip, at the end of the month, and you were going to be going and seeing your other, grandson. Tell me about that. What's been happening with that? And you can turn people around so that they start to focus on the positive things in their life. And it was tremendous how the senior center changed. And it was important to the community.
I vaguely remember a study where they had maybe octogenarians alone in a weekend, and they only had like newspapers from when they were in high school and pictures from that time. And people like rated their pictures before and after. Do you remember the details? Yeah. Tell us that, because that blew my mind.
What they did in that study is for a weekend, they played the music from when you were a teenager. They had activities from when you were a teenager. And then the other group, the control group, they just had a normal weekend away. It wasn't, they didn't try to change the feeling of the age. And at the end of it, the people who were behaving like teenagers in that environment, literally, their flexibility increased, their mental acuity increased, everything. They were literally biologically younger.
So do you play like 60s like sock hop stuff? Is that am I even saying that right? I don't know. Like, do you play music from?
Yeah, you can play music. You make sure that the other thing that I did, and I think it makes a tremendous difference, is that a lot of people, if you're a director of a center and you're serving thousands of people, they sit in their office and they just deal with the finances and whatnot. And I thought, I'm going to treat this like like you're going into a resort. And that the resort director comes out and greets you, and at lunchtime goes from table to table, and you know everybody and you interact with them. It's all about those simple interactions. And there's lots of negatives in small towns because the pressure to conform, but the good part is that social network. Have you seen this? I love this new study that they just came out with about the significance of all of the people that you interact with. It's not just family and friends. It's all of those incidental interactions that you have. Like, I don't like the idea that we're checking out our groceries ourselves at the grocery store. I need to find a cashier that I talk to, and I know that cashier is raising her grandkids, and it's Halloween time, and what's she doing getting ready for that? I mean, we need to have so many different people in our lives that forms that fabric. It's really significant. And I mean, clearly I'm an extrovert, but even if you're an introvert, you need those other people asking you the questions so that you feel included too.
Totally. Isn't that the truth about everything? Amen.
I sound like the silent host over here, but I'm fascinated because both of y'all studied to learn what you learned in like a structured study setting. I learned it by tripping into yoga and then feeling different and then getting curious. And I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he's the one that's with Doug Braden that's studying that the mind has the power to heal the body. That the whole piece that you were talking about positive aging, Dr. Powers and I were just talking about mindset and how mindset of these professional athletes. Well, really, it's just the mindset in general, that if we can think positively, I remember being in the best shape of my life at 51. A lot's changed in the last year, but I still was in the best shape of my life, and age didn't mean anything because I never thought that I would feel like that at 51. My mindset shifted because there were some things that I started taking on that challenged my schedule. And so my mindset started to shift. I started to feel worse about myself, and it becomes like this momentum that kind of brings me down. And then one Saturday morning, all I had to do was wake up and just, I'm going back to clean eating. And like, it was like just another turnaround where I started to feel empowered again. I started to feel positive, even though nothing had changed. it was just me and my mindset making a commitment to eat clean again. I already started feeling better about myself. So positive aging, I love that story that you tell about that and how you made a difference at that one place, but then it trickled into other communities, and it's like the ripple effect.
The invisible hand.
Well, and I think when you're talking about what environment you live in, what I tried to do in the senior center in terms of the environment, and use lots of little pieces of the master's program, the positive psychology. I think it's if people come into a place, do they feel valued? In other words, people are glad to see you and you're part of this place. And if you're not here, we miss you. And so when you come, we did a thing for Mardi Gras where I said, we're going to pretend like this is a cruise, because the people who are coming to the senior center, they can't afford to go on a cruise. They also are many of them are in a situation where it's not going to happen. But I said, we're going to have a cruise here. We'll have a table of lavish desserts. Now, Jason, this part you'll appreciate, because one of the things we know is that you should savor things, but you only need 3 bites and then you're satisfied. And so I said, we're going to have this fabulous dessert table like you'd see on a cruise, but everything's going to be really small. So you can load up your plate with all these different things, but there's just little bitty bites. And so that you could savor and taste all the different things, but not overindulge. And so, Jamie, when you're talking about that one trigger, that clean eating thing, don't you think it's fascinating where just little bitty things can reset the course that you're on?
Yeah, it's amazing. I have several different micro moments in my life that I can describe where it was just a decision was made and my life was altered, and then the people's lives around me were altered. Because I did battle addiction. So, when I was in my addiction, I was also affecting the people around me. And so what we have to remember is who we are is who the people around us are too, because we're making either a difference in a positive way or a difference in the opposite way, no matter what. And so I love that. I'm fascinated by this conversation, really. It's great. It has me brainstorming about how we can implement some things like that inside the facility to even create a different experience and always look to get better so that we can always look to grow. Because to me, that's what this is all about, is to stay in the growing mode rather than becoming old.
Well, and I think as you're talking about the environment in which you work, we underestimate the power of the individuals through their compassion and their kindness and their willingness to greet you, how important that is to a workplace. And so you have this job description, and so many times I think the top of the job description is, how do you treat other people? There may be things down there. Maybe you're not very good at, and I don't want to say filing because we hardly do that anymore, but you may not be that good, but it matters more to us what you contribute to the environment where we work. No drama. I don't want any drama queens. You know what I mean? And so you've somehow got to help people realize that that's what matters in this environment, is how you interact with other people, clients and other staff.
That's so profound. I love that. And I thought you were going to say people have job descriptions. They should be job callings, because that's what I got from Jane Sutton or Dutton's work. But what's come up for me is your perspective to aging can really impact 8 years of your life. And so many people are in the situation where it's like, how do I not blame age on this? I can't see so well, whether it's cataracts or glaucoma or, just retinal degeneration or whatever. My bones do hurt. I'm not making it up. And this is so it really is. It comes back down to kind of like living with pain, for example. Are you thinking of all the things you can't do or all the things you can do? So it's like, instead of, I can't lift my kids up over my head and do, yeah, but you can read to them, or you show up in this way. So it really is a matter of, okay, we're all going to age. Father Time or, works in one direction's undefeated, but it's imperative, like before you get to that stage of old age is bad, is kind of preparing young people to look forward. And this is what good age is like. This is what good death is like. Don't you think? I think it takes more preparation when you're not in that situation to sort of get ready for it.
Well, and I really think that's kind of something individually what helps you shift your mindset. I know for me personally, I remember one time when I was young and I was feeling blue. I mean, shoot, isn't January the longest month? I mean, it goes on and on and on, and you've got bleak weather, and I mean, and so I think it must have been a January, and I was blue. And I thought, well, I just need to get out of the house. And I went down to our local dollar store, and I went in and was at the cashier, and I looked over, and there was a guy in a wheelchair. And he kind of had a lap robe on, but you could see he didn't have any legs below his knees on both legs. And I instantly go, who am I to be blue? Get over it, kid. And so for me, like recently when I was hearing people being depressed, but they go because of all of the horrible earthquake in Turkey, they're going, how can I complain? I have a house. I have food in my refrigerator. I have nothing. So for some of us, I had a dear friend that whenever I would, get a little tired of my parents, I'd call her and hang out with her. And her mother was really awful. And it made me feel better to hear her awful mother stories because it made my mother look wonderful. I mean, so for me, the mind shift comes with seeing how much better off I am than others,
Right. Well, it's like the way to be happy. The way to be happy is surround yourself with uglier people who are shorter, whose relationships are worse than yours, whose kids are snottier than yours, and make less money.
Right.
And again, that's subjective though, right? Because to you might be different to somebody else. And I hear what you're saying in regards to that, because there's when Dr. Powers started talking about that, I remembered one of the most profound moments when I was out in the parking lot trying to talk to a gentleman whose parents, he's 38 years old, whose parents brought him to treatment. His wife wanted nothing to do with it anymore. She wanted him in treatment, didn't even want to drive him there. He would not get out of the car to come in because all his mindset was what he was having to give up in order to be there, what it was going to be like, that it was going to be hard. And I was trying to sit there in the parking lot and shift him to what's possible. Like, what is it that you'll gain back in your life? Like, what are the things that will, like your parents won't have to drive you to treatment at 38, that your relationship might start to mend, trying to get him to see the reason why he was coming in the first place. Because everybody wants to go and then they get there and then it's scary. And then they want to look at all the things that are wrong and they put their attention on what they're losing, which is what Dr. Powers was just alluding to, rather than to what's possible. And it's hard to get somebody to shift to that because most people may not really believe that it is possible. And that's the little pieces that shift the mindset, is that I can't make that commitment if I don't believe that it's going to be possible to start eating clean and shift. So
Jamie, it's really interesting what you're saying. It goes right hand in hand. At the end of our master's program, Marty Seligman he became fascinated with the idea of proscription, and proscription is predicting the future. And I think there's a lot here. He said when people deal with, and I would assume it's true for addiction, but he was thinking of depression, that people look to the past. And he said he felt there was a lack of imagination in imagining the future. And so that people who are depressed, or like the fellow you were talking about who couldn't get out of the car, he could not imagine a different future. And so the idea is, how do we honestly deal with that in a realistic, a realistic way about, this is what your future can look like. Can I help you believe it? But more than important, can you know it? And that's where we need models that you say, this person did it, this person did it. There's something within you. And like you said, a higher power. You're not going to do it by yourself.
Yeah. And the thing is it's interesting. You talked about two things. One is believing and knowing. And I just heard this yesterday, that the things that we believe, we don't know. That's the reason we believe them. Like, we don't believe our car's parked outside right now. We know our car's parked outside right now. So our way of being is that our car's parked outside right now. If we believe it, there's some sense that it might not be, and it's not there. And when you're dealing with somebody in recovery, there was a time that I was facilitating this conversation with this group of people, and I was trying to get them to think about something that they've always wanted to do their entire life. And this one lady was just like, I don't have anything. I don't. And she just couldn't bring anything to the forefront of her mind. And so I asked her to just walk through a 1-minute guided meditation where all we did was focus on breath and go inward to her heart. And then when I had her right at her heart, I asked the question again, and she burst into tears, and she just opened her eyes and said, I've always wanted to be a teacher. And she was crying, and I started crying, because we get to a place where we don't even believe it's possible anymore, that we can't even recall what it was that really drove us when we were little.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a lot of what you're speaking to, that creative imagination.
It is.
Yeah.
Positive Recovery Center supports the Way Out Women's Center, which is a nonprofit 10-day free detox for women in the Houston and surrounding areas struggling with substance abuse. The Way Out Women's Center has been changing the lives of women for over 50 years and has provided a safe environment for women to recover from alcohol and drugs. They're committed to health, healing, and self-worth, and they strive to help establish a bold and purposeful beginning on their path to recovery. You can reach the Way Out Women's Center at 713-645-9962, and they are located in Pasadena, Texas at 3217 Iola Street, Houston, Texas, 77017.
With Dr. Powers' positive recovery curriculum, there's the tool that y'all use that's called high quality connections. And I didn't want to take away from high quality connections, but what we did was we created a deck of cards. There's 52 playing cards. And each card, there's a question, and it's designed to create quality connections. Because a lot of times we just talk about the normal things that come up. So I'm going to randomly pick a card and ask you a question. Or you can just tell me a card if you want, like pick a card in a suit.
9 of diamonds.
9 of diamonds. Thanks for not picking a spade. The spade is a really tricky one, because when you pick the spade, you actually ask the question to the person that was holding the cards to answer about you.
Look what I have written down. I knew she was going to pick the 9 of diamonds.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. What's that guy's name on Johnny Carson?
And I didn't just write it after she said it. That definitely did not happen.
I'm aging positively. I love my readers.
Oh, don't you love them?
What's the craziest event you've ever witnessed?
Whoa, that is really hard. The craziest event I've ever witnessed. This was really cool. This was in, and I wouldn't say this is just what popped in my mind. I was in college, and we went to the beach in the nighttime. And so outside of Palo Alto, when you go to the beach, it's quite rocky, but there's lots of sand. And we were there, and people took off their shoes and they kicked the sand, and it was fluorescent. It was phosphorescent. It was arcs of sand, but it was all of these. I wasn't high either, you guys. There's these little phosphorescent creatures.
But this was Palo Alto, California, though, right?
I don't know. I mean, there were people with me who were in altered states of consciousness.
Those little animals, they have like bacteria in them that glow in moonlight.
Yeah. And so so you'd kick, and it was these arcs it looked like sparks, but it was the sand going in the, and it was in the moonlit night. It was absolutely fabulous. I've never seen anything like it again. It was just cool.
They should do that. They should do Coachella on that beach. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. Do we do 2?
Well, that was a great answer. Yeah. Pick another card. Pick another card that I'm thinking of.
If you could travel to any time, past or future, where would you go and why?
Well, that is really something. I think I would go back to the time of Christ to see what he was really like as a man.
Interesting. I love that.
I mean, to see what's real, what's been done with it over time. I would just be really curious.
Yeah, cool. Good answer.
That's fascinating. I love that answer. Yeah.
What I remember about Debbie's, one of her comments she said in class when we learned the optimal frequency of doing like gratitude like a gratitude journals once a week. And Debbie, you were like, no shit. We've been figuring that out in the arena of life. That's why you go to church once a week. because it kind of wears off. We just know to do that. I was like,
yeah. Religion really practices a lot of what positive psychology recommends. It really does.
yeah, like groups of people getting, yeah.
I have a very dear friend who is a neighbor. She was one of these kind of Eeyore people, I mean, I loved her dearly, but she didn't always saw the glass half empty. And she was having trouble because they'd kind of basically fired her as the organist of the church, which is kind of a time where you struggle. And so I made a package for her of a notebook and explained the 3 blessings that every day you write down, hunt the good stuff, 3 good things that happened in your life, and that you do it for a week. And that's like getting vaccinated for well-being. And 6 months later, you'll still be experiencing well-being. That's my little pitch. So a week later, she told me, she said, Debbie, she said, I don't think doing this just 7 days is enough. I'm going to keep doing it. And she said, I'll tell you what, the day starts and I get so nervous that I won't have 3 things to write at the end of the day that I spend all day long looking for good things that I might write. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's why it works. She's all of a sudden, instead of looking for things that she complains about in her life, she's looking for positive things that she can reflect on, that she's happy in her life. Isn't that cool?
So cool.
It's interesting because I before I even met Dr. Powers, knew about positive psychology or positive recovery, but had been practicing yoga. I started writing a gratitude list every morning on my Instagram, and it just got very creative. And then I got intentional and started declaring states of being that I wanted to be that day. But the gratitude list happened for about 1.5 years before I went to this yoga class where they told you that if you do it for 30 days, that you kind of shift the formula from the negativity bias. And I had already been doing it for 1.5 years, but what I hadn't done was look back to see what had transformed. And when I heard that, I looked back and I was like, oh my goodness. And I also think that it's, for me, I always tell people, if you're going to do one, do it in the morning when you first wake up, because you have this blank mind. Like, you do it at night, you think about your day, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that. But you do it in the morning, you're really having to work that muscle to try to find something positive and good. And I would get creative with it and then put some music to it and tie the song to it. And it transformed my life, I believe. And I am a big component on gratitude lists. And I love what you said about her and how she was looking for something to make sure she had 3 good things to write.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
That was cool.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, you do 3 great things. So like during the day, you hunt for the good stuff so that at the end of the day, you're like, what 3 good things happened to me today? That's different than what am I grateful for?
Yes.
So this is an assignment, like a positive intervention?
Yeah.
What a perfect tie-in.
It's the story that I tell about my son changing, like his set point has to do with the fact that we did 3 great things as a family. Remember, he started out like nothing because he's low set point like his dad. So, we did 3 great things. After like 18 months, he was transformed and he was like, when I'm older, I'm going to be wise and surrounded by family, so it's great. It's stuff works. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 3 great things. That's that intervention.
I gotcha. It's a little different.
All right. So speaking of positive interventions, Debbie, did you have a chance to do the positive intervention?
Yes. I mean, yeah. I thought,
oh, you did.
Excited. Are we going to do it?
We're going to talk about our experience with it. Yeah.
So we're on day 48. That was the assignment that was given to you. And the quote was to throw out an alarming alarm clock. If the ring is loud and strident, you're waking up to instant stress. You shouldn't be bullied out of bed, just reminded that it's time to start your day. Sharon Gold. And so today's PI was to take an inventory of external stressors that can be minimized or eliminated in your life today. List 5 proactive things that you can do to de-stress your life and share these ideas with an accountability partner. Do your best to implement your actions today to enhance the tranquility of your life. And so doing that, what was your experience with it?
So I have lots of reactions. One is, years ago, I read about this for an alarm clock, that there's some Aboriginal people that of course, they didn't have alarm clocks, but they would change the quantity of water they drank before they went to bed. and that's what would wake them up in the morning, is because they had to go pee. And so if you have a really early morning, to drink a lot more water. I'm sorry. So that is
awesome.
So that is a natural way to wake up that is not, an alarm clock going off. So, and also, I think when I was a kid, I had a clock radio. And here I am living in this little town with one little radio station. And I woke up every morning at 6:45, and it always played this horrible song, "When it's springtime in the Rockies," and to this day, I really am not too crazy about country Western music because of that song every morning with a Western twang. But no, I wake up to music or, different ways. But I think about the part when you're distressing. Do you both have to commute through heavy traffic?
Yes, if we leave like the wrong time. So yes and no. Like I know how to avoid it by going early or whatever, but yeah.
But for most people, any time of day in Houston, Texas is traffic if you're living in other smaller cities. So it's stressful whether you're going at 8 o'clock in the morning or whether you're going to drive by the Galleria at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's hectic.
So this is one of the stress relievers that I did for that. My son, the one who's invented the Rio system, that I talked about earlier, he had moved here from Brazil, and his wife was Brazilian, and they had my grandson, and they lived through heavy traffic. And I said I would come and babysit him while she went to English classes. And so I had to go through peak rush hour traffic twice a week. And I had just moved from Wyoming. So dealing with that was something I hadn't done for a long time. So I put on, like the spa type music, which I know drives a lot of people nuts. And then I just pretend it is a modern miracle that all these people are driving, 2 tons of metal, but we're like a flock of birds that are murmuring. Like, you ever seen those flocks of birds that are up swooping together? And that's what traffic is. It is a modern miracle that all these individuals know the rules of the game, and we're all just swooping together, flying and listening to this gentle music. And sure, there's an aberrant bird every once in a while who likes to cut across all the lanes of traffic, and you just go, oh, so what? Everybody else, we're just flying and twisting and getting there, and we're all in sync. Do you realize we're all in sync? And look,
like
I don't care what their political beliefs are, how much education they have. We have all learned to drive these vehicles and do it in a similar way, and we communicate. I let the guys behind me know. I tap on my brakes and they know what's coming. We're all communicating. It was really took the edge off. And I wasn't in a rush. I can't go any faster than the flock, can I? So anyway, that was a de-stressor for me.
I love that. And I just want to tie it back into what we talked about earlier. Because when you're driving down the freeway and that person in front of you is not moving and you're like, what are you doing? And you honk your horn and you pull up next to them and they're like 85-year-old grandmother that lives next door to you. And all of a sudden you're like in this shame. It's the mindset. And to have the mindset of that you're all flowing naturally, even though this one's flowing just a little bit different, as a whole, it's actually moving. I love that. It's mindset. That's beautiful.
Well, and we talk about all the time how horrible our world is and all the things going on. But there are just some modern miracles that we just take for granted. I mean, think about all of these cars that have been built in all of these factories and shipped here, and people work to own them. And then here we all are, driving them. It's really pretty fabulous what we're doing.
I walked outside the other morning and it was like right as the sun was coming up and I could see through the trees and the color of the dark sky and how it was starting to light up a little bit, and was thinking how beautiful that was and wondered how could I see that all day long. And as I was walking back in the garage, there were these bottled waters that we have in the garage loaded up, stacked up on the side. And I we walked by that and I thought, we don't ever think that that's beautiful, but what could I find beautiful about that? And then I thought about like the way that we are able to distribute products and get it out to people in such a timely fashion so that people are stocked up in the event that something happens, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can like find it in almost anything, like traffic.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's really pretty amazing.
Wow, that was worth it. You took something that brings me a lot of stress, and now I can practice. I can practice.
And it's called.
He has one of those self-driving Teslas.
Oh, that's fun.
No, it doesn't self-drive 100%. So like when I'm going slow, I whatever.
It has a word when you see those birds swooping, like, it's called murmuring.
Okay.
It's an actual word. That's the action of them doing that. And when I lived in LA as a young person and had to commute once a week, I thought, this is shortening my life, because once a week I thought I was going to die. And when you think you're going to die, you get pumped full of adrenaline, and right. I thought this is like smoking or something, that once a week you think you're going to die just because you're commuting. Yeah.
That's not positive aging.
No,
it's not positive aging.
It's aging for sure.
Yeah, I'm surely going to die. That's great, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us. We do have to wrap up, but man, what a special treat. I never would have imagined that we would learn so much about positive aging, even though I remember now that's what you did your capstone on. Like, I thought we were going to have a political discourse. This was so much better. So much better. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. It's great to see you, Jason, doing so well. And Jamie, love meeting you. I think what a wonderful journey you've been on. That's awesome.
Again, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Remember, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is all we got. So please take care of yourselves and take care of one another. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.